You are listening to Able Radio, simplifying productivity for small business owners everywhere. If you are looking for 1% improvements that add up to big results, this is the place for you. Every week, we learn about simple systems and tools that will help you build the business and life you've always wanted. Now here's your host, Zachary Sexton.
Most people have not had any reading training since elementary school, and it is time for a tune-up. So I have your reading mechanic right here. Her name is Abby Marks Beale. It's a good friend. I originally read her book, 10 Days to Faster Reading, and have had the opportunity to go through her course of the same name. And why this is so important is because so much of the information that we take in is through words. And a lot of times people have not had any sort of training since elementary school on how to read. And those skills that they taught you in elementary school were for people learning to read. And now that you've had so much experience over the thousands of emails you've likely read, the hundreds of books, the articles, it's time to really speed it up. And a lot of people worry about speed and losing comprehension, but Abby, through her training, has shown that it's not the case. In fact, it can be the opposite. So, Abby, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Zach, for having me. Really, my pleasure.
Why don't you lay the groundwork for how you teach people to get started in thinking about reading and how it can be done more efficiently, more effectively?
Definitely. So it's really, when people hear the word speed reading, they get this skepticism like, oh, that's just for, strange people that they can actually read faster. That's not for me. I don't know how to do that. And so what I try to explain to people that it's really about taking who you are and making different abilities. So I call it the 5 gears of speed reading. So if you take your hand, take a hand and you look at your thumb and your first finger and say, these are gears 1 and 2. And then gears 3, 4, and 5 are your middle finger, fourth finger, and your pinky finger. And so everybody has these 5 gears. The problem is that most of us are stuck in the thumb and first finger or first and second gear because we haven't learned, no one's taught us, from school anyway, how to go to gears 3, 4, or 5. So it's really about being efficient. There are times where reading quickly is really effective and useful, and there are other times where it's not. And so being able to know when to go faster, when not to go faster, and how to do it is really what I call the active, mindful, and conscious strategies. They're just not taught in school, and it's not really the school's fault per se. It's just that so many people struggle. They go through college, they're even in their careers, and they just don't know how to get through it all. And the difference between someone who is successful in their career and someone who's not, I believe, really is based in how much they read in their industry and how much they can read for professional development. And so the more that you can get through, in an efficient way, the better off you're going to be. And it could be that you're reading in gear 1 or 2, but you're doing it intentionally. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, well, and what I loved is you really tie it back to the importance of actually reading and consuming useful information. I know there's been a handful of books that have completely changed the trajectory of my life. And if I thought of myself as somebody who didn't like to read or was a poor reader or just didn't take the time to do it, or when I did, it would take me a month or two to get through a book versus a week or two, it can really stagnate you in your career and in your personal life and all these different areas. So let's speak to the people who are stuck in first and second gear. And for those who are not familiar with your material, I would have to say, I don't know if you're into cars, but you're into car analogies. So everything's a race car, everything's a gear, everything's opening up the rear view I don't know. I'm just teasing. You do keep this analogy because it works well. It makes sense. It's something tangible. Now, I have 3, and there might be more, sins or mistakes that people make when they're reading. And these are the people that are likely stuck in that first and second gear and have a hard time taking in a lot of new information via the written word. Can you talk about those?
Yeah. And so you call them sins. I just call them normal human habits that people have. The first one everyone has, which is called daydreaming or mind wandering. And anyone who says they don't ever do that when they read is probably dead, because everybody does in one way, shape, or form. It's just that some people do it a lot more than other people do. And in this day and age, I think concentration for reading without mind wandering is very, very challenging between all of our devices that are calling for our attention, the multiple to-dos, just so many things that everybody has going on, the busyness that everybody has, and to stop and to monofocus is a real challenge. And so, believe it or not, when I do trainings, I tell people, even think about learning things like meditation and yoga and breathing so that you can learn how to do that. So when you sit down to read, it's not going to be a foreign experience to you, to monofocus. So if you'd mind wander when you read, it means typically that you're reading under about 300 words a minute, because you think upwards of 400 words a minute. So if you're, let's say, in a classroom situation, in a classroom, a person can only talk about 100 to 150 words a minute. So they better be saying something that fills in up to 400 words per minute in your brain. Otherwise, you're going to daydream. And that's why we daydream when people talk. And so when you are reading, you want to be able to read at least at 400 words a minute to be able to really curtail the tendency to daydream. Like, you'll never not daydream, but it's how to slow it down or be more conscious about it. So just on that vein, there's really two ways to daydream. One is effectively, which is if you're reading about something you're familiar with. Let's say you're reading about leadership skills or something like that, and you went to a leadership training, you would then be thinking about the training that you had as you're reading about leadership skills, and that's a good daydreaming because you're applying what you know to what's on the page. So you're building this bridge of knowledge is what I call it. And then there's the not effective or bad daydreaming, which when you're thinking about, I got to pick up the tires, at the dealership, I have to call my mother, I got to do, empty the dishwasher. It's all the things that are just like swirling around your head. That's the bad daydreaming, because it usually has nothing to do with what you're reading at the moment. Another bad habit that people have, it's a human habit, is regression. When you go back over words that you've already read. And a lot of times it's very unconscious. And in my workshops, I have people actually put reading material in front of them and have other people watch them read, and their eyes will track across the line. But a lot of times it'll go a couple of words across, and then there's this like quick regression back to the word they already read, and then they go forward again, and they go backward, forward, backward. And so it's just this, I'm not sure exactly how we got it, except maybe self-doubt, that people think they're not getting it. And so they just don't efficiently move their eyes rhythmically. So they have to learn, the faster you read, the less you can go backwards. It's kind of, a no-brainer with that. And using your hands or a card helps with regression tremendously. And then the last one is when you talk in your head, you mentally whisper. It's called subvocalization. And subvocalization is very common. It's how we've learned to read here in the States anyway, when you sound it out, hear it in your head. And so what you're doing is you're seeing the words from the page, and instead of it just going straight back to your brain, you put it into your mouth, technically. You're sounding it out in your head or even visually, with your lips, and then you're wanting to hear it. And so that slows you down. That brings you down to that 150, words per minute. And so subvocalization is great when you can go to that gear. That's like gear one. When you're reading the Bible, if you're reading the Bible, you're reading, you're studying something, you're trying to commit it to memory. You read poetry. No one wants to read poetry quickly. Shakespeare, nobody can read Shakespeare quickly. So those are the kinds of things, even like a play. If you're reading a play, you want to read, what did he say? What did she say? And you want to slow down so you get the feel and the texture and the sound of what it sounds like. So that's okay to slow down, but everything else can go faster. And so being able to know that you can go faster is really the key. So learning to reduce subvocalization, reduce regression, and reduce mind wandering will all help with the speed part.
Wow, that's great. I didn't know that meditation or other mindfulness exercises would actually play into your ability to focus more and the ability to read faster. I know you mentioned in your book and your course about getting preoccupied with all that you have to do. And a technique you even suggest is just before you read is write down all those things that might be on your mind, because they're going to keep coming back to you unless you close those loops, which goes into an overall bigger productivity system, which you and I could geek out about for some time. So we'll keep our focus on the speed reading for a moment. And I just have to say thank you, because the regression was the thing that I had the biggest issue with. And going back and looking at either sentences, words, entire paragraphs, sometimes entire pages, by flicking my eyes back and forth. And it might have been a little bit of a trust issue. I think I do it with material that I'm not as familiar with a little bit more, or if it's in a foreign dialect or there's maybe a different language involved, I might do it a little bit more. So it might be a bit of a trust thing. But for me, I think it had to do with my eyeballs.
Yeah.
Let's start talking about the eyeballs and how we can use that to increase your speed and comprehension, retention, all those good things when it comes to reading.
So as I was kind of alluding to before, that when you do things like regression, it means that your eyes are not tracking equally across from left to right. And so by learning how to get your eyes to track accurately from the left to the right and then accurately back to the beginning of every line, going back all the way from the right all the way to the left, people don't realize that's kind of a challenge, and that you need to be able to do it accurately and quickly. And so when you use your hands to read with, and for example, I mean, here's a very simple one. If you're reading something that's, at least, or no, it could be anything. It could be a newspaper, it could be a magazine, a column, anything like that. You take your left hand at the beginning of the line, your right hand at the end, and you're pointing your fingers. So if anyone's watching the video, you can see what I'm doing. But if not, you're basically like sticking your fingers out, pointing, and you put your left finger at the beginning of the line, your right finger at the end of the line, and in effect, your eyes will ricochet off your fingers as you move your fingers down. And so what you're doing is you're really just segmenting out all those words on the page into this one place that you need to focus at a time. And believe it or not, Zach, as you do this, you get better at it, and your eyes expand their peripheral vision. You not only start to see widely, but you get to see more vertically. And so there are times when I'm reading a newspaper, which is about 6 words per line, I could read probably 5 or 6 lines in a gulp. Literally, I look at it and I get the whole concept. And I never knew I could do that. That was just like, oh my gosh, look at that. That's just like amazing. And so it's really about growing your peripheral vision, first widely, going across horizontally, and then vertically. It's just like amazing what you can do.
And that was I'm glad you mentioned that technique. That was the last one I've gotten through in the course. I've done 6 of the 9 modules. I read the whole book though.
Yeah. I know. So, you're great. You're great. Thanks for your support.
I haven't gotten through the last part of the course, although I've gotten through the meat, which is the more important part for me, which is the retraining of my eyes and learning of these techniques and when to apply them. And that was the last one that I did, the 2-finger technique. And there's a bunch that I'm like, that one didn't resonate with me. That one kind of works. But the course actually times you on how fast you're going, and you just click what word you got down to. And when I started the course, I was about at 300 or so, maybe about 350 words per minute, which is faster than I used to be. I think I used to be sub 300, which is probably another reason why I had some more regression, because maybe my mind was wandering. But that one with the fingers on the side, and it was an article that I was pretty familiar with. I knew the topic. You were talking about David Allen of getting things done. So I knew the topic pretty well, so I had a good familiarity with it. But it was 950 words per minute. I just plowed through it.
I love it.
And it was amazing. I was just like, oh, okay. And I had that same feeling of and I didn't realize at the time, but it probably was happening, is the height, the vertical and the horizontal was expanding, so I was able to take in more information more quickly. I really, honestly, people say, oh, speed reading, but what do you remember? No, I can tell you can quiz me. In fact, you did quiz me, and I got a 10 out of 10, and I understood what I had just read. So that technique in particular, it can be very effective. It's one that I'm now going to use, especially if I need to get through something a little bit more quickly. One thing to note is that you can't really do a technique like that if you're laying down in bed, or maybe you got the TV in the background. So do you want to tell us anything about environmental factors and how you can set yourself up for success there?
Oh, big time. I'll preface it by talking about when I work with college students, and I do an on-site workshop with them. And one of the first things I ask of them is, how many of you go to, fall asleep when you read? And, inevitably like 3/4 of the room, raise their hand.
I sucked down energy drinks just to get through my reading in college.
Yeah. And so I asked them, I say, so I understand that you're tired. I know that you don't get a lot of sleep. I said, so tell me, what time of day are you typically reading? And most of the time it's nighttime. So one of the biggest sins is that you're saving reading to the end of the day, especially college students. And they're just so tired. It's like, that's not the time to read. You got to read when you're awake. And the second is, where are you reading? And a lot of them will say, oh, I'm reading on my bed. And I'm like, do you think there's a relationship between falling asleep and where you're reading? If you're reading on your bed, like, hello. And so they kind of go, oh, yeah, there might be a relationship there. Well, there is, because the body relaxes in a place like a bed or even a couch or a lazy boy chair. You're just kind of going, oh, this is my relaxed place. It's not my workplace. And so you want to find places, if you're reading for work purposes or academic purposes, things that you really want to study, it's really hard to do it in a comfortable place. So you have to put yourself, sitting upright at a desk or a table without interruptions, phone on mute or in the other room, no TV. If you're going to have music on, it should probably be just like classical. And actually now with Pandora and Spotify, you can put on these classical music, playlists for studying. And it's great. You can put it on quietly. You don't even have to create them yourself. And it just put it on quietly in the background. And it just is amazing when you get yourself in the right environment mentally. You have to be awake. You can't start this at 11 o'clock at night unless you're a real night owl. It's really something that, you sit down and put the head down and do. So, yeah, environment is huge. You can learn all of my strategies, but if you're still trying to do them in bed, don't expect much. Okay. It's just not going to happen.
All right. I'm glad we got that in there, because that is an important one. Environment, and then one thing that's non-strategy related, but I also feel is important, and I was speaking to it a little bit before, is attitude. And that's something that you talk about in your book quite a bit, talk about in your course quite a bit, is, if you feel you're not going to be good at this, you're not going to be successful, then your likelihood of getting that result is a lot higher. Where if you think of yourself as somebody who can do this, or who's an avid reader, or a voracious reader, or I'm trying to think of a speed demon Formula One reader, then it can really put yourself in a position to where you can be open and try these techniques and really get a lot out of them. Before we go into the next technique, which is my favorite, which is keywords, can you tell us a little bit about the journey, how you should expect when you're learning this new technique? Are you automatically going to be faster, or is there maybe a point where you plateau? Is your comprehension going to go down at first before it goes back up? Can you tell us some common journeys people go through when they're trying to pick up these techniques?
So I call it the fine print. when you're taking this course, be it live or even online, is that when you first start doing this, you're basically trying to change the conversation that your eyes and brain have been having for a long time. And if you're a younger person, that's great. If you're an older person, that's great too, but you've just been doing it longer. And so you have to help your eyes and brain understand that there's a new way to communicate. And so when you first start doing that, there's this almost like a disbelief by the brain, like, what are you doing? What are you trying to do with your eyeballs? That doesn't make sense to me. And so the brain doesn't give you the confidence that you're actually getting what you're reading. And so you don't feel the confidence. But if you were actually to do a reading, a faster reading with a strategy with 10 questions, what you'd find is that, you got more right than you thought you would, because subconsciously you're getting it, but consciously you're not feeling it yet. So I tell people that what happens is that your speed will, if you're doing the things I'm telling you to do and you're doing your best to say, I'm just going to really try this with my eyeballs, your eyes will go faster, but your comprehension could dip down just temporarily because the eyes and brain are just not talking enough yet. But in a short period of time, they come up into a better place. And then again, you may push again and you go up again. And so it kind of is it's like a wave that can continue to go up. So when you first start doing this, you start to see some changes, then you see the comprehension going down. You're going, why would I want to do this? And I'm just going to reassure you to say, really, in a short period of time, you're going to be much better. And if you went through the Revved Up Reading Online course and you did all the modules from the beginning to the end, you will definitely come through it during that time. There's 17 timed exercises, in there. So you have the experience to do it. The hardest thing about learning how to read faster is being able to temporarily let go of comprehension. So in this course, in my course, in any of the education I do, you're not being tested for grades. This doesn't count. And so you have to remember this doesn't count. So if you tank on one of these readings, so what? Say, okay, what did I do differently? What was the problem? Was I thinking too much about it? Was I distracted by it? Or was I just too tired to do it? Think of what is it that might have been a problem. And then next time, reapply and keep working at it. So it's about letting go of comprehension temporarily. It's so hard, especially when I work with like engineers or lawyers, people that are like so detail oriented, and that's how they've been trained. I just say, look, this is going to be the hardest thing for you to do. But if you can do it, you're going to find that you're going to get a lot more in less time.
Oh, that's great. Good to get that fine print out in the front so people,
totally.
when it starts happening to them, they can recognize, okay, got to break some things before we get everything that we want. Or your car analogy is, okay, you're driving a car, you've been doing it for a really long time, it's an automatic, and then all of a sudden you have to drive a stick. Well, you got to think about how, the clutch and then putting the thing forward and moving your eyeballs and holding your fingers. Like that might be a reason why your comprehension has gone down, because you're thinking about the techniques in addition to the material that you're trying to get in. Trust the process, and some techniques will work better for you than others, and that's what the track is about. You time it, you see how you did, you see your comprehension, and you do that practice one or two more times, and you start to realize, okay, this one really resonates with me. Maybe this one isn't as helpful. And that's what's so great about your material, is that you give so many different techniques that a handful of them are bound to work. And
that's the whole idea. I try to give people a menu. It's like a buffet to pick. Yeah. So that, because not everything on a buffet everybody wants, but if you know that you can choose, try different ones. And what you're saying, like the white card really didn't work so well for you, but about 80% of the people, when I show it to them, they're like, oh my God, this is like the best thing since sliced bread. So, but everyone's different. And that's why I like to just say, here's some really great strategies. Pick the ones that work for you. It's not a box. I'm not putting you in a box saying, if you don't do this, you can't do it. That would not, I don't like to do that.
That's great. As we're recording this, it's not too long after Thanksgiving. And one of the things I like to do in Thanksgiving is I get a roll, and then I get stuffing, and then I get the cranberry sauce, and then I get some turkey, and I make a sandwich, and I just eat all of those things together. Can you make a speed reading sandwich with all these different techniques?
Totally. And I tell people that really what you're aiming to do is to, number one, I call it previewing or cheat reading. So if you're reading nonfiction, the first thing you do is you find the writer's outline. That's the first piece. And once you do that, then you can use your keywords, which we haven't really talked about, but the I strategies of keywords or phrases, or combining them together to key phrases, and a hand or card method. And you combine all those three, concepts, active, mindful, conscious concepts together, and you've got an incredibly powerful sandwich that you can really, take in all at one time, and it's wonderful. It really is the way to be awake and focused when you read.
That's wonderful. And that is the section I didn't get to in the course, but it was something that I had already done. Is whenever I get a book, I look at all the chapters, I look at the outline, I look if there's anything in the back, and I do a lot of pre-reading ahead of time. And I didn't actually realize that was a speed reading technique, because my brain now knows where the book and the author is going, so I can speed up because I'm aware of how things are going to be laid out coming forward. So glad you brought that up. Keywords. Let's talk about keywords. This is my favorite.
I love your enthusiasm. So keywords is one method for not just moving your eyes, but picking up the most important information when you read. So if you think of like newspaper headlines, they give you the most important information, and typically they don't have those 3-letter words or less, like the, to, it, for, but, he, she. And so when you learn how to focus your eyes on words that are longer than 3 letters in length or longer, what you're doing is you're picking up, for the most part, the more important words. And sometimes they're verbs or adjectives. And it's very, very helpful for finding information quickly while keeping you actively engaged in what you're doing. And so it really helps you move your eyes along very rhythmically and intentionally, and you focus so much better. It really does reduce the daydreaming too, because you're putting in your brain what's most important. It's not just, oh, here it is, let me read it. It's really more important.
And it comes back to that speeding it up so your full attention is on the material. I know a lot of people, I do this myself. I've recently talked to some listeners that say, oh, I normally listen to you at double speed. And you and I both talk a little fast, so we're probably at the 200 words per minute. So if they double the speed of this podcast, they are listening at 400 words per minute.
That's crazy.
It's a little weird at first, but if you have a good podcaster app, I use Pocket Cast What's another one? Overcast is another one that you can actually speed it up and you don't sound like chipmunks. It's just faster. And you just get the information a little bit more quickly, which is a benefit. It's just the same as speed reading, but just with your ears. And you've got less mind wandering, you got more focus. When Zach talks about Thanksgiving dinner, it doesn't take that long to get through that part. So that's the keywords, and then you could even take it out a step further with the keyword phrases. Can you tell us about that?
So there's the other concept is called chunking or phrasing, where you're basically taking a sentence and grouping it into thought units, thought groups. And you do this more when you have technical material, because if you do keywords on technical material, most of the time technical material is all words that are bigger than 3 letters in length, so that's not very effective. But if you try to grab groups of words that form a thought, like the favorite exercise we were talking about, discipline your eyes, that's in the course, there it is. So it says the purpose of this drill is to discipline the little muscles of the eyes that move from left to right. I think that's what it says. And the way that I just said it was in phrases. Yeah, I've been doing it for a while. And so what it does is it basically says these are the groups that make sense together, instead of the purpose of this drill is to discipline the muscles of the eye. So it, instead of it being one at a time, it's a thought. The purpose of this drill is to discipline. And so the idea is for you to learn, for us to learn how to find those groups, because they have to make sense. So it has to be appropriate. It can't be the purpose of this drill is to discipline eyes to, you see, it's just too choppy. And so it has to be effective. And they could be big phrases or small phrases, but they have to make sense. So you basically start grouping or making bigger bites, if you want to call that, of your sandwich, bigger bites as you go along, and you're still getting all the words that are there. Yeah. So it's a different concept. And then you can combine the concept of keywords and phrases in a sentence. So sometimes you can hit a keyword, phrase, keyword, phrase, keyword, it just, you're active, mindful, and conscious instead of just individual words one at a time. And that's what you need, is to have those strategies.
Yeah, and for those who can't see this exercise, but I believe you offer a free day which will have this exercise in there.
Yes, the one day pass will be my favorite module 4, which includes my favorite exercise called Discipline Your Eyes. And so you'll get a really good personal feel for what I'm talking about with that exercise.
Yeah, it's a great exercise. Just to describe it a little further. The purpose, there's a big space, and then of the drill, there's a big space, is to discipline, and then it goes down to the next line. So you're practicing training your eyes to go from one side of the paper to the middle of the paper to the right side of the paper, and only just making 3 quick stops versus stopping at every single word along the way, which you have another exercise, the bar to dot exercise, both in your book and in the course, that help you do that too. And that was the thing that helped me so much. So this module 4 is the one that, like, it's worth the whole price of admission. So if people go through that really quickly, and get that, they're still pretty far away. You probably want to do the whole course because there's so much more to it. But this is kind of the key here, because one thing that you say is that your eyes, rather than just going linearly across the, that was a hard one, across the line, it's making these, what was the word, staccato jumps. And so your eyes jumping every quarter of a second. So every quarter of a second, that's as fast as your eyeball can move. So if you are doing one word each time your eye moves, so each quarter of a second you've only got one word, you're limited to 240 words per minute. And that's like your absolute max if you're right on, moving every single second, which is not very likely to do. Or if you change that to a keyword or keyword phrases, it automatically goes from 200 to 50 to 500, 600 very quickly without losing any comprehension. So I just got to say, like, for people who are thinking that, I've seen the guy who has, like, reads the Guinness Book of Records and just goes down the pages and he's a freak or he's cheating or something. You really can dramatically 2-3x your speed just by using some of the techniques we've already just talked about on this show. So do it. It's awesome. I always thought of myself as a slow reader. That was something I just said. I'm a slow reader. I took many more hours in high school and in college to get through the same amount of reading as my classmates. I eventually did, and I comprehended it, and I did pretty well in the classes, but it just took me so much more time, and it's really nice not to have to take that time anymore.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm so happy that I could have helped you, because I used to hate to read, and I thought the same exact thing when I was in college. So I learned this stuff after college, and so I totally get where you're coming from, and I wasn't born this way. I had to learn it, and that's why I teach it. I think it's just so important for people to know.
Well, I think that's a pretty good taste. Is there anything else that you want to share with people as far as techniques or strategies or takeaways? Before we part ways, we'll let people know how they can get a hold of the course and get a hold of you and all that stuff, of course. But anything else you want to talk about?
Just one topic is, and this is what got me, probably about 12 years ago. I've been doing this 28 years. So about 12 years ago, no, maybe 15 years ago, I had a reading pile that was just out of control. And I kept thinking, how could a speed reading expert have a pile that's out of control? And the bottom line is that I wasn't, number one, I was just amassing way too much stuff that wasn't of value to me. And so in the course, I show you how to make a pile more quality. But the second is that I wasn't making time to read. I was always really good at saying, oh, I'll get to that later. Oh, I'll get to that later. And so if you really, really want to read, you have to start building it into your life in some way. And it could be on a daily basis, like as you're having breakfast, to read an article or two in something, or if it's on the weekend that you reserve Saturday morning for going through your reading pile and to really just get through some stuff. It's got to go into your life. If not, you're always going to have stuff to read. So it's about really being mindful about what you save and then making time to do it. It's just, without it, forget it. It's a lost cause.
That's really good advice. I've answered.
Yeah.
Now I've got a better answer, but I've responded to a lot of questions in the past about, how do you get my read later list under control? And that's honestly probably the biggest answer. Yeah, doubling your speed would help, but making sure that pile is really the pile that you need, and carving out the minutes and hours that you need to get through that is probably the bigger of the two wins. Well, Abby, great as always chatting with you. I always learn a lot. If people want to find out more about you and your course and everything else that you get up to, what are some places they should go?
Well, the online course, Rev It Up Reading, REVITUP reading.com. You can find the 1-day pass that's free. And we offer a 7-day, 90-day, and 365-day access to the course. So if you're really in a hurry, you could do it in 7 days. It only takes 5 hours. I usually recommend a 90-day just because, 3 months is enough for you to separate it out the 9 modules. And there's multiple licenses, and we all offer, like for colleges and universities and businesses, licenses for employees or students. So we're aiming really to try to get it out to more and more of that population as well, because everyone could use this. It's not something, like you said in the beginning, it's not something we've learned really since we've learned how to read, and it's a real good tune-up, and it doesn't take long. And it's I think it's really useful.
Yeah, I think it's something, if they had offered that at my college freshman year, I totally would have taken it up, because it's something that people come into, and they've got so much more reading than they used to. And it's same is true for the work world, where if you want to keep up, especially if you're in an industry that changes a lot, in law, in technology, you've just got to keep up with your reading. And if you're still at 150, 200 words per minute, it's going to be really frustrating. It's going to be really painful. So you're really helping people out, myself included there.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Abby. I will, I'll let you go for now, and I look forward to connecting in the future.
I look forward to it too, Zach. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Have you ever felt stretched too thin, busy but not productive, overwhelmed by all the tasks on your to-do list? Do you want to start taking more control over your time? The fact is, everyone does have a lot of demands on their time, expectations from your family, your friends, your clients, your coworkers, your employees, and even yourself. It all has a tendency to stack up quicker than it can be taken care of. The solution is better planning and prioritization, right? Sure, that would be good, but scientists have found that planning and sequencing your actions is one of the most difficult things we ask our brains to do. This process is made even more difficult by attempting to do it all in your head. That's why most people avoid planning and prioritizing. It drains them mentally, and their brain knows planning is going to drain them, so it comes up with all kinds of reasons to avoid it. I help my clients simplify this process of organizing their work. We're able to reduce the overwhelm and accomplish more by doing one thing: visualizing your work. When you can see your work, you've got awareness. And when you have that awareness, you have choice. Once your work is visualized, it becomes easy and fun to plan your days and your weeks. You'll also be in a better position to see patterns, make improvements, prioritize your best work, and automate, delegate, delete, and defer 80 to 90% of your to-do list. As a result, you'll be doing less work, but accomplishing way more. If you're an entrepreneur that would like a clear mind and a trusted system, I would love to work with you. We've got two choices. First, the free step-by-step program that I have. If you go to zacharysexton.com/choice, because when you visualize your work, you have more awareness, and when you have that awareness, you have choice. zacharysexton.com/choice for that free course. Or if you'd like to book a call now, a 15-minute no obligation session, you can go to zacharysexton.com/call. Thank you so much for tuning in. I look forward to connecting with you next Productive Wednesday.